Today, we're going to talk about how to make greens your gut's BFF. And if you're not familiar with me, I'm Alyssa Simpson, a gut health dietitian, certified gastrointestinal nutritionist, and I'm a food first digestive health coach. So, we're not going to talk about what you need to cut out of your diet today. We're going to talk about how to make greens your friend and not in a boring eat your veggies kind of way. Because if you've ever tried to clean up your diet, by adding more salads or started the week with the best of intentions, eating lots of greens and roughage only to end up bloated, gassy, or uncomfortable, you're not alone. Greens are absolutely packed with gut loving nutrients. How you prepare them and how your gut is functioning can totally change how they feel in your body. Today, I'm going to walk you through why some greens don't sit well, even though they're technically healthy, which greens are the most gut friendly, especially if you have IBS, reflux, food sensitivities, and simple, delicious ways to add greens to your diet without triggering symptoms. So let's make greens your gut's best friend, not something that you fear. So greens are powerful, but not all guts are ready for a kale salad. Greens can be one of the most healing foods when it comes to your digestive system. They are high in prebiotic fibers that support healthy gut bacteria. They have magnesium, which helps with motility and stress response and so many different functions in the body. They have polyphenols, which are plant components that help to reduce inflammation. And they also have a side bonus benefit of feeding good bacteria. And greens help to diversify your plant intake, which is one of the biggest predictors of long-term gut health, is a diet diverse in many different plant foods. So greens give us many options to include in that plant diverse diet. Here's the thing. If your gut is inflamed, underfunctioning, or overly sensitive at the moment, or if your microbiome is unbalanced, greens can feel like too much too fast, and your system just might not be ready for them. This might not be the time to eat that kale salad, but it doesn't mean you have to cut them out of your diet completely. And this is one of the things I don't really like that low residue, low fermentation diet that's out there for SIBO. It's promoted by some of the most renowned SIBO conventional doctors, dietitians. We don't like diets that are stripped of vegetables. We like nutrient dense diets. For everybody, a different diet is going to be best for them. Even with IBS or SIBO, there's not a one size fits all diet. So it's not, okay, everyone's on low FODMAP. That's not how it works. Everybody's diet's going to be personalized. They're going to have maybe some things they have to avoid, and it's going to be different from the next person. But in general, we want to make sure that we're including whatever extent of vegetables that you can tolerate. First, let's talk about why some greens cause trouble, even when they're technically healthy. One of the reasons is when they're served raw. So, in that salad example, raw greens like spinach, kale, arugula, they might seem light and clean and healthy, and they are healthy, but they can be the hardest to break down. Oftentimes, raw vegetables can be one of the hardest foods to break down because their fiber is very intact. So, let's say you're dealing with low stomach acid or poor motility, difficulty moving food through at the right pace. Maybe you're moving food through too quickly or too slowly. These greens can cause bloating post meal. And if you're sensitive, that's a problem. Another thing I want to insert here is poor chewing. Now, most of us don't chew well enough. Most of us have never even thought about how well we're chewing our food. So, this is another thing to keep in mind. If you're wolfing down that salad because you have 10 minutes to eat lunch, that could be also why the greens are bothering you. So, try this instead. Cooked greens. Sauteing, steaming, or even roasting greens helps break down the fibers and reduces the digestive burden. A few handfuls of wilted spinach in a soup or in scrambled eggs is very different from a raw kale salad in terms of digestibility. The next thing is the volume matters. Large salads can be difficult for anyone to digest. And if you have a sensitive gut, that much fiber, it can just overwhelm your system. There's a lot of bulk to that salad and it expands your stomach pretty large pretty quickly. So, for example, if you have acid reflux, that's not a good thing because the more full your stomach is, the more pressure it puts on your lower esophageal sphincter, and the more likely you're going to have reflux after that meal. And it's just a lot of fiber too. So instead, try swapping that big raw salad for a warm veggie bowl. Include like light cooked zucchini, spinach, green beans, put a protein in there, and a gut friendly starch like rice or potatoes. And that way you're still getting in your plants, even a diversity of plants, just in a more gentle, nourishing way. Another thing to mention here is histamine issues. So when it comes to spinach, especially when it's not super fresh, spinach can be high in histamine. Now, histamine intolerance happens often alongside gut issues because inflammation in our intestines reduces our ability to break down normal histamines that are in foods. When we're not breaking them down, eat the foods, the histamine breaks up, builds up in our body, and we get histamine related symptoms. For someone who's histamine intolerant, a spinach salad might cause things like headaches, reflux, skin reactions, or brain fog. So keep an eye out for those things. That would be a clue that you're histamine intolerant. So if you are histamine sensitive, go for greens like romaine, butter lettuce, or even fresh arugula, and eat your food in general as fresh as possible. That helps decrease the amount of histamine that builds up in the food. Another thing I want to clarify here is FODMAP confusion. There's a lot of confusion out there, and even with myself before I learned about FODMAPs, is it's a common understanding that broccoli's gassy or all cruciferous vegetables are gassy, when actually, now that we have Monash University studying all of these foods, we've learned that some cruciferous vegetables are fermentable and likely to cause gas, whereas others are low FODMAP, meaning they're unlikely to cause gas. They're less fermentable. So broccoli, actually, this is so surprising. Broccoli and cabbage are actually low FODMAP. You can check the Monash app for the portion size because there is a portion limit where it would become high FODMAP, but the portion's very reasonable. It's like you wouldn't eat more than that. Broccoli and cabbage are actually low FODMAP. Now, if you're nervous to try it, just start with a little bit, just even for your mindset, not to panic. Sometimes we can create symptoms just worrying about a food we're putting in our mouth. So if you're nervous because food fear because of digestive symptoms is a real thing, but you want to try the broccoli, just start with a quarter of the amount you would normally eat, or even a bite or two, and see what happens. And as long as that goes okay, you can build up a portion gradually. Now, oh, bok choy is another cruciferous vegetable that's low FODMAP. A few of them that are high FODMAP that you might want to watch out for, especially if you're prone to bloating, would be the cauliflower is high FODMAP, and so are Brussels sprouts. Instead, just you can use the Monash app to guide you to which ones are better if you do experience bloating. Now, here's a list. I'm going to share with you the most gut-friendly greens that I recommend to my clients all of the time. So these are especially gentle and tolerated for people with IBS reflux or SIBO. Zucchini, it's light, low FODMAP, super versatile. You can roast it, spiralize it, or fold it into eggs or rice bowls. Cooked spinach, unless you have histamine intolerance. Now, even if you do have histamine intolerance, there's a threshold, and everybody's different in how much they can tolerate. And spinach is actually a histamine liberator. So it's not directly high in histamine, but it can cause histamine release. Spinach, just tread with caution if you know that you have histamine issues, and especially when it's cooked. Even last night, I had a whole bag of spinach, cooked it down to half a cup or a cup serving. So it cooks down, it concentrates a lot. You can get a lot of spinach when it's cooked. But I will say, outside of histamine intolerance, because not everybody with IBS and SIBO has histamine intolerance. Outside of that, spinach is very well tolerated, especially when it's cooked. So I use it a lot. And my patients do very well with it. Swiss chard is another great one. This is really mineral rich and it's great cooked with maybe a splash of broth or garlic infused olive oil. Romaine and butter lettuce are good go-tos to add crunchy texture without triggering bloating, and those are good lettuces to start with if you've been away from salads for a while or even away from raw veggies. Green beans are almost appropriate for everybody. I can't think of one like group of people or one type of food intolerance that would even need to avoid them. So these are definitely an excellent go-to. They're super gut friendly, great roasted, great steamed. Cucumber is also low FODMAP, can be nice, gentle on the system, hydrating, easy to add to meals. Often, when somebody's transitioning from cooked vegetables to raw, it's one of the first things I'll add in because it's a nice bridge. It's pretty gentle. And then arugula would be the other one. Has a great flavor and it's very gentle as greens go. And again, start with a small volume. So, how can we get more greens in our diet without overthinking it? So, let's talk strategies here. How can we actually get more greens in our diet if we have sensitive systems? So, the first thing, this is one of the things I like to talk about all the time, blend it into a veggie mash. This is one of my favorite tricks because we can get lots of different diversity in plants and vegetables without a lot of volume. So it's a great way to include foods that maybe you don't tolerate in full portions and you get tiny bits and you get a diversity of fiber. And that's really valuable when it comes to feeding a diverse microbiome. So you can eat just a tiny portion of the veggie mash. You take 10 to 15 different vegetables, you blend them up together in a food processor, and then you can even just freeze them in an ice cube tray and pop out one ice cube. This is great for people who've been on the chicken and rice diet or that you've whittled your diet down to 5 foods. You can't tolerate anything because there you are, anyone can tolerate one ice cube's worth because of the 10 to 15 different vegetables, there's just one or two little pieces in there, which is low FODMAP. So Monash will give you the amount of a vegetable that's low FODMAP. So even Brussels sprouts, for example, that's very high FODMAP in a normal portion, one Brussels sprout is actually low FODMAP. So when we're talking about a veggie mash where you're just getting a piece, like two tiny pieces of a Brussels sprout in a serving, along with 10 to 15 other vegetables, these are amounts that we can tolerate. So this is a wonderful strategy. I have a recipe and guide for how to make one that I'll include in the show notes. Another way is to stir the greens into soups and stews. You want to wait till the end of cooking, and then you're going to toss in your chopped spinach or chard. It'll wilt in seconds and blend right into the flavor. Roast instead of boil is another strategy. Boiling can strip the flavor out, can leach the nutrients out. So, roasting broccoli, green beans, or even cabbage brings out a whole new flavor. If you have an air fryer, especially, you know what I'm talking about, but even in an oven. And it also makes the fiber easier to tolerate. We can saute greens with flavor. So anyone who's sensitive to garlic or on low FODMAP, we can use the garlic infused olive oil, broth, or even coconut and aminos to saute greens and give them depth. And then pairing greens with something moist can be helpful, especially for people like people who have EOE or swallowing problems. Greens go down a little bit easier with something moist. So if you can pair them in a bite with mashed potatoes or cooked grains or with a little bit of sauce like tahini or an olive oil drizzle. Goal is not to avoid greens or to fear fiber. It's to meet your gut where it's at and rebuild from there. Your body is incredibly adaptable. If greens don't feel good to you right now, that doesn't mean they never will. It just means your gut might need a little support first through motility, calming inflammation, rebalancing your microbiome. And if you're already doing all the right things and greens still don't sit well, it's just a clue that you may need to dig deeper. And that's exactly what we do in our practice at Nutrition Resolution, we look deeper, we do testing in many cases to figure out what your symptoms are telling us, and we use food as a tool to heal. So, before we wrap up, I have a couple things for you. I'm going to share one of my favorite ways to get a variety of greens without overloading your gut. It's my low FODMAP green goddess salad recipe. So you guys are in for a real treat with this one. This version is totally gut friendly. It skips the garlic and onion, uses infused oils, and it's packed with fresh herbs like basil and chives. And it uses gentle greens like butter lettuce, cucumber, zucchini ribbons, and the dressing gives it this creamy, herby punch without any of the usual gut triggers. So I'm going to leave the link to download that recipe in the show notes, along with the link for the veggie mash guide. And I'll leave the link for our 15-minute strategy call so that you can schedule that to talk more about how our coaching services might be able to help you.